Welcome to Agronomy Moment. I'm your host, Wendell Cohen. We bring in people who agree with me, disagree with me, and above all, are not afraid to say it like it is. All right, guys, today welcome back to us. We're going to talk to our podcast, Agronomy Moment. We're going to talk about post-emergence and run a really brief thing here. We're going to try to make this quick because we know you're busy. We're going to talk about managing a young corn crop and some of these first few weeks and the critical milestones that we need to be looking for, watching for, to put us in the best position for a good crop. We don't know if this is going to happen, but what about frost freeze? What happens?
Yeah, so in a frost freeze event, of course, after one of these, it's best to give the crop or those little seedlings a little bit of time to recover before we make assessments.
Yeah.
So generally with corn, we think about it being a little bit more forgiving, if you will, yes, for our part of the world and where that typical growth stage is when we are thinking about these risks as far as the cold temperatures. Most generally speaking, we have our growing point still below the ground, yep, which would be before V5. Once we approach that V5 time frame in corn, we want to think about when we assess this, probably if we haven't seen new growth, splitting open that corn seedling in half, and looking at the crown, the growing point, and seeing that if it is still a healthy growing point, so remaining a whitish, greenish color, and if it is, then we still have viable plant there, and if it is brown, we most likely have lost that corn plant.
Yep.
So to the flip side, soybeans can be a little bit more challenging as far as just where they're typically at with their growth stage. Most generally a little bit more critical of a growth stage for yes, soybeans, with their growing point being above ground. So with those cotyledons being above ground, what we're looking for is a healthy hypocotyl. So kind of the neck of the soybean, if you will, and we want that to remain healthy, not brown. If it's brown and squishy, the frost has probably done it.
It's game over.
Yep. If it looks burnt to a crisp, it's probably game over. But in saying that too, if we do have a survival at the cotyledons, the growing points, on either one, we still have potential there as far as healthy or a plant that's able to recover.
Yep, I think that covers it really well. And the bottom line here is if you absorb the bullet points we have up here, if this happens, give us a call. We'd be glad to come help walk, because there's certain clues that can help give us a predictor of what happens. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with corn, we just need to be a little patient.
Yeah,
and it'll happen. And the weather that happens after makes a difference. There's other aspects that can help improve that situation really quickly.
Right. And in this photo, for example, we're looking at a couple pretty ugly plants from corn plants from last year's frost that we had. And these plants did recover. Yes. They do look ugly. It does look like they're pinched off pretty good from growing out of that whorl. However, in these situations, if we're assessing these, 5 days after,
yep,
I like to put flags by these plants, mm-hmm, so then we can revisit them and see if they have actually pushed out and look like they're going to recover. So just another little tidbit there, some way to mark these plants like this, because not all will end up most likely looking exactly like this.
Right.
So just kind of if we are revisiting those fields, trying to see where we're at, if those plants recovered or not, or how well they are recovering, those flags are a good tool to have.
Absolutely. They help you understand the percentage of loss versus success.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We will move on to our next thing here that can happen in our springtime, somewhere during that. We're just about ready to take off, start growing. We've had cold weather. I don't have a lot to say on this, Selena, unless you do, but just know that sometimes corn can look pretty ugly duckling out there with rapid growth taking place, where it gets that twisted, roping look.
Yep. So whenever we're looking at that buggy whipping. We can see that buggy whipping as related to frost, recovering from frost, or we can see that rapid growth also, that buggy whipping from herbicide as well. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind there when looking at that. And then the purpling of plants, if we have had somewhat of cooler conditions, we can see that anthocyanin build up, which causes that purpling of the leaves, and that glucose concentration, like the bullet point says. We can see those things after emergence, and corn tends to go through an ugly duckling phase every year before its roots really start to reach out to that nitrogen, and it's starting that rapid uptake phase of nitrogen. And once it hits that, we usually see those plants come out of that a little bit.
Another thing to be alert and to remind us on is watching for cutworm, armyworm, especially in high residue areas. Noticing cut off plants, damaged plants from cutting. Needs to be examined, especially in cool, damp conditions.
Yep, corn and soybeans both. So, corn, if it's been cut, while it's in the whorl, and you have that emerged corn plant, you'll see on the leaf that you'll have two holes, just symmetrical. That's just because the leaf was in the whorl, and then it got cut by a worm, and so you typically won't see that until after emergence. But nonetheless, that's kind of what that looks like. And seeing right now, early seeing those alerts come in that armyworm, cutworm have been found the very north part of the state of Missouri. So again, like Wendell said, just keep an eye out for those.
It's typically not a huge deal, but those times that it is always worth the annual scouts.
Yeah, especially those armyworms. If we would turn off cooler and wetter, probably want to be on the lookout.
Just real brief, just a reminder as you go forward from V5 on and watching that corn come out of its ugly duckling stage, be watching rainfall, be kind of doing some calculations, talking to your agronomist, talking to us is great. It's a good idea as you prepare for top dress and getting all the mechanics of what it takes to get this to happen, if you're going to do it or if it's needed. I wanted to highlight these two charts just to show you kind of how that uptake looks as we get into corn and sulfur uptakes, nitrogen on the right and sulfur on the left. And as we get past that V6 time frame, we start really seeing an uptake really big in nitrogen and then also sulfur shortly thereafter.
Yep. And just a little bit on that point, it seems like historically thinking of the best time to top dress, waiting until V6 or after, but through PFR and a lot of research, having it there, giving it an opportunity, that nutrient opportunity to get into soil, the soil, closer to the root zone, by when the crop needs it, has
very, very good.
Very
high return.
Yes.
And I think we want to highlight too is even though there's a big uptake, as you get to V6 and on, we should also take note is that it does take some from VE on, from emergence on. And so having just a little bit up front and then coming back in before it needs the big load can be a good program to consider. So big point that I want to make here is be ready.
Yep.
Because weather moves rapidly, corn plants move rapidly, and suddenly we're staring at something we don't like to stare at. So thank you very much, everyone. Anything you want to add, Selena, before we wrap up and go?
Nope.
We may add something to this podcast in season as it goes on. We did record this here just a little ahead of time so that it could have the information in front of you at a timely manner in case things get super busy. But just know that we are here for you. Give us a call anytime, email, phone call, or whatever your favorite mode of contact is.
Yes.
If it's rolling down the pickup window and talking on the highway, that works too. See you.
See ya.
On the next one.